TFA fam, welcome back in. Today we're going to be discussing some of our favorite wide receiver plays of the week and guys that can absolutely win you your week. So let's jump right into it and kick things off. Start things off with our wide receiver ones for the week. We got Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, Deontay Johnson, Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel, the running back, Chris Godwin, Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Keenan Allen, who sounded like he did return to practice today. So it sounds like he could be trending towards actually playing this week. And then Cordell Patterson to wrap things up. Moving over to the wide receiver twos, we have Jalen Waddle, Mike Evans, Tyler Lockett, Hunter Renfrow, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, Amari Cooper, Mike Williams, Michael Pittman, Brandon Cooks, Marquise Brown, and Van Jefferson. As things currently stand, we have Odell Beckham, who is on the COVID list. We have Jarvis Landry, who's on the COVID list. And we also had the big news today of DeAndre Hopkins, likely done for the year, at least for the regular season. They're going to hoping that he can return for the actual NFL playoffs. But, he has a knee sprain there. So, no more DeAndre Hopkins rest of the year. Worst time for this possibly to happen. But maybe it's good for people because he has not really been all that effective this year, and you feeling forced to play him. So those are the kind of the guys to see what happens with that. But other than that, let's jump over to the wide receiver threes, and we have Darnell Mooney, DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, Chase Claypool, Christian Kirk, Russell Gage, Devontae Parker, Julio Jones, Devontae Smith, Adam Thielen, who has a shot to return this week, and Cole Beasley. And so those are our top wide receivers. Now, let's talk about our must-start wide receivers of the week, the guys that we are absolutely excited about. So, Cody, kick things off for us. Who are you starting this week?
Yeah, let's talk about some must-starts that aren't as obvious as plugging in some of these studs. I want to kick things off with Van Jefferson, and whether or not Odell is able to make it back and get cleared for this, he is vaccinated, so he does have a chance to make it back to this game. I think Van Jefferson is a solid wide receiver 3 option, and obviously if he is out, that's going to send him up into the wide receiver 2 territory. In his last 5 games, he has at least 50 receiving yards in 3 of those. He has seen fewer than 7 targets just twice since week 7. I think he's wide receiver 24 and PPR points per game during that time as well. And the matchup against the Seahawks looks worse on paper than what it really is. And a lot of that has to do with the fact they've only given up 7 receiving touchdowns to wide receivers on the year, but they are 28th in Football Outsiders pass DVOA. So I really like this matchup for Van Jefferson. Like I said, whether or not Odell Beckham is cleared to return. The other one I have here in this same range is Brandon Ayuk. After finally getting out of Shanny's doghouse at the beginning of the year, he has been consistently and constantly involved in this offense. Now, not going to go out and expect Ayuk to see 11 targets to Deebo's 1 the same way it happened last week, but something to monitor and watch. Maybe we do see a slight repeat of this because Elijah Mitchell is still not back at practice, was out today with that knee concussion. It didn't really say whether or not he's been cleared yet, but the fact that he's still not practicing doesn't really bode well, even though it's only Wednesday and we tend to not really care too much about those Wednesday practice reports. But either way, going up against Atlanta, Falcons are giving up the 8th most PPR points per game to wide receivers. Ayuk has seen fewer than 6 targets just once since week 7. He has double-digit fantasy points in all but 3 of those as well. So I really like Ayuk as another option here in the first week of the fantasy playoffs. Kev, who do you got for this week?
So for me, I'm going to kick things off, and I'm going to start with Julio Jones. He gets an excellent matchup this week against Pittsburgh. He did only play 46% of the snaps last week, 6 targets for 33 yards. But fear not, that was a game that they kind of had in hand. It was 20-0. They really didn't have to throw the ball that much. So there was really not a lot to worry about there. But I think in this matchup against Pittsburgh, they are going to have to open this offense up a lot more. A.J. Brown is still not back here. And, the other guys they have to rely on are guys like Marcus Johnson and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Julio Jones has not really had that monster performance, that big breakout game that we typically see from him in years past. But I think this very well could be that game. I think you see him far more snaps than the 46% that he played last week. He gets an excellent matchup against Cameron Sutton, who's absolutely terrible. 68% completion percentage on the year, 14.2 yards per reception, and 114.3 passer rating. And Pittsburgh allows the 10th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So I really do like Julio Jones this week in a bounce back spot. I think he's a really solid wide receiver 3. Next up for me, on the other side of that game, I have Chase Claypool. Now, if Chase Claypool can stop being a if Chase Claypool could stop being an idiot and doing dumb things, well, just like he did last week against Minnesota, and just, I mean, it wasn't even just that. It was he got benched because he got a terrible personal foul penalty in the first half where he decided to, try to poke DB, and then you try to get him to respond, and then you had the last, that right there at the end of the game, that likely cost him a play because he wanted to show off. I digress. That none of that matters, but he is losing playing time because of that, because he continues to do dumb things every single week, and they are sitting him and they're taking him off the field because of it. And he's just killing himself right now, but he's still been fantasy viable. He has a 20% target share in this offense, a 34.8% market share of the air yards, 17th among all wide receivers, 19 deep targets, 9 red zone targets. He's averaging about 12.2 fantasy points per game, and he's 2.16 yards per out run, which is top 30, and then 25th in yards after the catch as well. And the Titans have been terrible against opposing wide receivers. They allow the second most fantasy points to wide receiver. They allow the most receiving yards, the most receptions, and the fourth most touchdowns. So this is a great spot for both Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson in this matchup against the Titans. This Titans defense is not very good, especially through the air. And I think this could be a nice spot for Chase Claypool, who's been okay as of late. Again, we're just not seeing those typical monster performances like we saw last year from him. And it's, really, he's only has one game this year over 20 fantasy points. Now it's all the way back in week 5. But some of that's because he's not scoring touchdown. He only has one touchdown on the year. But still, even over the last 4 weeks, he scored 14.4, 11.2, 7.4, and then 17.5 last week against Minnesota. So he has still been useful. He's been a decent wide receiver 3 for the most part this year. So don't mind Chase Claypool. And then last but not least, we have Devontae Parker. He's averaging 8 targets per game with a 21.4% target share, 5 receptions for 62 yards against the Giants before their bye week 13. Listen, I want to tell you, the Jets are terrible. They're 32nd in pass DVOA. They have allowed the 11th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, but some of that's a little bit of a smokescreen considering the fact that they've had the second fewest pass attempts against them. And so some of that's just because they've been so fucking terrible against the run. The teams just choose to run against them and not really open the offense up as much and throw the ball. So, but regardless of that, I still think this is a really solid spot for Devontae Parker. You're going to see a lot of Brandon Echols, who allows 63% complete percentage and a 98.4 passer rating. So I do really like Devontae Parker as kind of a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, and for a guy that a lot of people picked up off waivers. So I think he is also another very viable option here, and a great matchup against the Jets. It sounds like Jalen Waddle should be back, who kind of got banged up at the end of that game. But I love this entire offense this week. Devontae Parker, Jalen Waddle, Tua Tagovailoa, I think are all fine options this week. So those would be the 3 guys that I absolutely love at wide receiver. And with that being said, I appreciate everybody checking out the video. Be sure to hit that like, subscribe button for future content. I really appreciate everybody checking out the video. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.